am hoping that your day has been wonderful and that you have gotten to spend it with your family and that you've gotten to talk about all the wonderful things that Jesus did and how amazing this day really is. It's such an important day and it's so fun to celebrate. And I know our celebrations might look a little different this year. You might not be with as much of your family as you might have been before, but I will say that it's okay because this day is all about Jesus and it's all about thinking about him. And if we do that, we are celebrating right. We're celebrating the right way, giving Jesus glory for all he did. And so we're going to jump right into our story today because it's probably the best story of all time that we're going to get to read today. And it is going to be a little bit longer, so hang in there with me, but it's going to be worth it. Last week, I'll remind us that we ended our story with Jesus after we started talking about the stinky feet, right? And how Jesus was a king, but he was a servant king, and how he taught his disciples how he's not just a king that's come to tell people what to do and boss them around, but he is a king that was here to serve. And so he told his disciples that they should serve too, and they should wash people's feet, and that they should follow in the way. And he told them also about how they ate their Last Supper together, right? It was the Passover meal, and Jesus got to tell them about the breaking of the bread and the wine, and he was telling them about how that was going to be his body, and it was going to break for them, and when his body broke, they would be healed. And he was telling them about how when his blood was shed, that they would be clean. So that was really special. And it ended with this picture, if you remember, of Jesus just telling his disciples about what was going to happen and how he was going to be their rescuer, and just telling them all about that, okay? And we also got to talk about our memory verse that Jesus was talking about when he was telling his disciples. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Right? And so Jesus was just telling them that he's the only way. He's the way to live. And we're going to jump right into our story today because I'm so excited. Okay? So after the meal that they got to share together, Jesus went, and it said that they went into a garden together and they were singing a song. But this is what happened when they were in the garden after they ate that meal together. So, a dark night in the garden. The wind was picking up now, blowing clouds across the moon, shrouding the garden in darkness. "Stay up with me," Jesus asked his friends. They said yes and waited under the olive trees, but they were tired and soon they fell asleep. Jesus walked ahead alone into the dark. He needed to talk to his heavenly Father. He knew it was time for him to die. They had planned it long ago, he and his Father. Jesus was going to take the punishment for all the wrong things anybody had ever done or ever would do. "Papa, Father," Jesus cried, and he fell to the ground. "Is there any other way to get your children back, to heal their hearts, to get rid of the poison?" But Jesus knew there was no other way. All the poison of sin was going to have to go into his own heart. God was going to pour into Jesus' heart all the sadness and brokenness in people's hearts. He was going to pour into Jesus' body all the sickness in people's bodies. God was going to have to blame his son for everything that had gone wrong. It would crush Jesus. Wow, so we remember how people can't be perfect and they can't always do the right thing, but Jesus always did. And so that was saying that God was going to give Jesus all of the things that people had done wrong so he could carry it. But there was something else, something even more horrible. When people ran away from God, they lost God. It was what happened when they ran away. Not being close to God was like a punishment. Jesus was going to take that punishment. Jesus knew what that meant. He was going to lose his Father, and that Jesus knew would break his heart in two. Violent sobs shook Jesus' whole body. Then Jesus was quiet, like a lamb. "I trust you, Papa," he said. "Whatever you say, I will do." Wow. Jesus didn't do it. Suddenly, through the trees, a glitter of starlight flashed off steel. Into the quiet garden came whispers, muffled voices, clanking metal, and the sound of boots marching. Jesus stood up. He woke his friends. "Now is the time," he said gently. "Everything that was written about me, what God has been telling his people all through the long years, it's all coming true." And into the night, with burning torches and lanterns, with swords and clubs and armor, they came, an army of soldiers. Judas led them straight to Jesus so they could arrest him. Jesus was waiting for them. Remember in our last story, we heard about Judas and how he was going to betray Jesus. This is when he did. Peter leapt up. took a sword and tried to defend Jesus. He sliced off a guard's ear. Jesus immediately touched the guard and healed him. Peter, he said, this is not the way. Peter didn't realize that no army, no matter how big, could ever arrest Jesus, not unless Jesus let them. Then Jesus, who had never done anything except love people, was arrested as if he were a criminal. Jesus' friends were afraid, so they ran away and hid in the dark shadows. The guards marched Jesus off and took him to the leaders. The leaders put Jesus on trial. "Are you the Son of God?" they asked. "I am," Jesus said. "Who do you think you are to call yourself God? You must die for calling yourself the Son of God." Only the Romans were allowed to kill prisoners, so the leaders made a plan. "We'll tell the Romans, 'This man wants to be our king,' and they will crucify him." But it would be all right. It was God's plan. "It was for this reason that I was born into the world," Jesus said. "So you're a king, are you?" the Roman soldiers jeered. "Then you'll need a crown and a robe." They gave Jesus a crown made out of thorns and put on a purple robe to him. They pretended to bow down to him. "Your Majesty," they said. Then they whipped him, then spat on him. They didn't understand that this was the Prince of Life, the King of heaven and earth, who had come to rescue them. The soldiers made him a sign, "Our King," and nailed it into a wooden cross. They walked up a hill outside the city. Jesus carried the cross on his back. Jesus had never done anything wrong, but they were going to kill him the way criminals were killed. Wow. Jesus never did anything wrong, but he was still going to die for us. They nailed Jesus to the cross. "Father, forgive them," Jesus gasped. "They don't understand what they're doing." "You say you've come to rescue us," people shouted, "but you can't even rescue yourself." But they were wrong. Jesus could have rescued himself. A legion of angels would have flown to his side if he'd called. "If you were really the Son of God, you could just climb down off that cross," they said. And of course they were right. Jesus could have just climbed down. Actually, he could have just said a word and made it all stop. Like when he healed that little girl and stilled the storm and fed 5,000 people. But Jesus stayed. You see, they didn't understand. It wasn't the nails that kept Jesus there. It was love. "Papa," Jesus cried, frantically searching the sky. "Papa, where are you? Don't leave me." And for the first time and the last, when he spoke, nothing happened. Just a horrible, endless silence. God didn't answer. He turned away from his boy. Tears rolled down Jesus' face, the face of the one who would wipe away every tear from every eye. Wow. Even though it was midday, a dreadful darkness covered the face of the world. The sun could not shine. The earth trembled and quaked. The great mountains shook. Rocks split in two until it seemed that the whole world would break, that creation itself would tear apart. The full force of the storm of God's fierce anger at sin was coming down on his own Son instead of his people. It was the only way God could destroy sin and not destroy his children whose hearts were filled with sin. Then Jesus shouted in a loud voice, "It is finished!" And it was. He had done it. Jesus had rescued the whole world. "Father," Jesus cried, "I give you my life." And with a great sigh, he let himself die. Strange clouds and shadows filled the sky, purple, orange, black, like a bruise. Wow, Jesus did that out of love. It wasn't even the nails that were holding Jesus in the cross. It was his love for people so that he could die instead of them. That's crazy. Jesus' friends gently carried Jesus. They laid Jesus in a new tomb carved out of rock. How could Jesus die? What had gone wrong? What did it mean? They didn't know anything anymore, except they did know their hearts were breaking. That's the end of Jesus, the leaders said. But just to be sure, they sent strong soldiers to guard the tomb. They hauled a huge stone in front of the door to the tomb so that no one could get in or out. They kept people there to make sure that Jesus didn't get out, which is so sad after he died. God's wonderful surprise. All right, guys, this is when it gets really good, okay? Jesus' friends were sad. They would never see their best friend again. How could this happen? Wasn't Jesus the rescuer, the king God had promised? It wasn't supposed to end like this. Yes, but whoever said anything about the end? Just before sunrise on the third day, God sent an earthquake, an angel from heaven. When the guards saw the angel, they fell down with fright. The angel rolled the huge stone away, sat on top of it, and waited. At the first glimmer of dawn, Mary Magdalene and other women headed to the tomb to wash Jesus' body. The early morning sun slanted through the ancient olive trees. Drops of dew glittering on the leaves and grasses. Little tears everywhere. The friends walked quietly along the hilly path through the olive groves until they reached the tomb, and immediately noticed something odd. It was wide open. They peered through the opening into the dark tomb. But wait, Jesus' body was gone. It's in there. It wasn't even there. And something else. A shining man was there with clothes made from lightning. Don't be scared, the angel said, but they couldn't help it. They screamed anyways. Ah! Would you guys scream too if you saw this man? That would be crazy. The angel asked them, "What are you doing here? This is a tomb, and tombs are for dead people." The women couldn't speak. "Jesus isn't dead anymore," he said. "He's alive again." Their hearts leapt, and then the angel laughed with such gladness that they felt for a moment as if they had woken from a nightmare. Everything was better. Jesus is alive. Oh no, what's going to happen next? The other women rushed home, but Mary stayed behind. How could it be true? Jesus was definitely dead. How could he be alive? Just then, Mary heard someone else in the garden. Perhaps it's the gardener, she thought. He'll know where Jesus' body is. "I don't know where Jesus is," Mary said urgently. "I can't find him." But it was all right. Jesus knew where she was, and he had found her. Mary! Only one person said her name like that. She could hear her heart thumping. She turned around. She could just make out a figure. She shaded her eyes to see and thought she was dreaming. But she wasn't dreaming. She was seeing Jesus! Mary fell to the ground. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes and great sobs shook her while her whole body and all she wanted in that moment was to cling to Jesus and never let him go. "You'll be able to hold on to me later, Mary," Jesus said gently, and always be close to me. But now, go and tell the others that I'm alive. It's alive! Mary ran and ran all the way to the city. She had never run so fast or so far in all of her life. She felt she could have run forever. She didn't even feel like her feet touched the ground. The sun seemed to be dancing and gleaming and bounding across the sky, racing with her and shining brighter than she could ever remember in the clear, fresh air. And it seemed to her that morning as she ran almost as if the whole world had been made anew, almost as if the whole world was singing for joy. The trees, tiny sounds in the grass, the birds, and her heart. Was God really making everything sad come untrue? Was he making even death come untrue? She couldn't wait to tell Jesus' friends. They won't believe it, she laughed. She was right, of course. Wow, you guys, that's amazing. So today is the day that the reason that we're celebrating Easter and why we keep saying that Jesus is alive and that he's risen is because of that story right there. When the whole world thought that Jesus had died for good, the moment after Jesus had taken all the sin and all the bad and all the dark things from people on himself, and he died for us. So instead of us dying, Jesus died. And then everyone thought that he was dead for good, but was he? No way! He died and then he rose from the dead. And that means that he defeated death. He beat it once and for all. And he won. So now he rose from the grave and now we get to live with him forever. And that's why if we accept Jesus, that we get to live with him forever because he already took all the bad things away from us. So instead of us getting punished, Jesus did, but he beat it. Which is so crazy. So I'm going to go right into our attribute of God. What do you guys think it is? It's pretty special today, but God is alive. grave, here's the cross that he died on, here's a tomb that he rose out of, and he did it all in love, right? So he died, but he stayed and he died for us because of his love for us. He didn't even have to. He was God. He could do anything. He could have saved himself, but he did it for us. He did it out of love. He saved us. And so when we decide that Jesus is worth everything and that he is good and that those things are true, we get to live with him forever, which is amazing. All right, memory verse really quick. It's going to be, he is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Matthew 28:6, right? So just as Jesus told the disciples, he has risen, and he was not dead forever, and he rose again after the third day, all the things that he said. So if you want to memorize that verse, go for it. Also, keep thinking about how Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. And that is what he did. He died for us so that we could come to the Father through him, and he's the way and the truth and the life, and he is everything. So I know that was a longer story, but it was so good and so worth it. So yes. Happy Easter, you guys. That is what Easter means, is it means that Jesus came back to life, and it is a big celebration. So keep thinking about Jesus, keep inviting him into your hearts, drawing near to him, and he will be near to you because of what he did on the cross. Bye, you guys. Happy Easter.